Hi, this is J.D. Ingram of the Charleston Pipe Band, and I want to welcome you to my series on how to be a great piper in 3 steps. As a refresher, here is the tree diagram for our 3 easy steps. Stay tuned as we dive into today's topic. Step 1. Have good finger work. That is, everything that you can practice on a practice chanter.
All right, so hopefully you have your practice channel with you, and if not, that's okay because I'm not going to be working you through any exercises during this video, but it's a good idea to think about what we're going to talk about. And as a refresher from the last video, the 3 key sub-steps of have good finger work are play your real notes correctly, play the tune correctly, play your embellishments correctly, and play with musical expression.
The first part of step 1, have good finger work, is part 1, have clean playing. Clean playing means playing the correct note at the correct time with no crossing noises. Here we're focusing on the quote-unquote big notes on the page. No grace notes, no embellishments, just playing the right note. There's some tips that we can discuss to do this better.
So the tips that were just on the screen, if you didn't catch them or you maybe go back and screenshot them or something, the tips for playing the correct note are knowing the key signature, focusing, and making mistakes like a pro. Diving into that a little bit more, the key signature, like what, bagpipes only have 1 key signature, right? It's always written with 2 sharps. Yes and no. Think about a tune like let's say 2 of the most popular tunes that are played on bagpipes anywhere, Scotland the Brave and Amazing Grace. Scotland the Brave, right? The super watered down because we're only focusing on the big notes right now. First note is low A. Other notes that are held for more than passing note are C, E, and high A, right? Me, 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 me. That is a major arpeggio. Convenient, right? And our drones are in A. Everything works. Amazing Grace. Right, so we've those 3 notes. That is a D major arpeggio. We could also do a G major arpeggio or a B minor. Here, that sounds a little sadder than the other ones. So thinking about it, you might know it. Oh, that tune plays a lot of B's, D's, and F's in it, and it sounds kind of sad. It's one of those creepy sounding songs. Or it's a tune that starts and ends on D, and everything in between it is D, F, and A. That is what I mean by key signature. If you're playing a tune that you have realized now, have this epiphany that the tune is in D, then perhaps you shouldn't be playing, make a mistake and think, oh crap, what's the next note? I want to play a C next. No, don't do that. That's the wrong note. I don't know what tune it is that you're thinking about, but it doesn't have a C in it. I can tell you. And that's what knowing a little bit about music theory, just the bare minimum of A, D, G, and possibly B minor and E minor. Knowing that those are gonna be the structure of your note selection, that can help you make a lot fewer note mistakes. The second thing, focus. That's almost a no-brainer. My old teacher told me the difference between a good piper and a great piper is focus. You, me, most bagpipers out there, we could probably go 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Some pretty good bagpipers can go 15 or 20 minutes without making a mistake. But eventually everybody gets tired, everybody gets bored, everybody has a cell phone vibrating in their sporran, and they stop paying attention to what they're doing, and that's when they make a mistake. So train yourself to extend that focus. Mental exercises, feeding your body, eating well, sleeping well, etc., etc., etc. And when the time comes that you eventually do make a mistake, having the mental wherewithal to know, oh crap, I don't know what note's coming up next. What note should I pick? Well, if it's in D major, you're not going to pick a C. A good bet is always going to be high A, because high A blends with everything and it's the quietest note on the chanter, except for high G. That's the only thing that's not good to put over. And if it's not going to be high A, then hopefully it's something in the key signature, because you know the key signature. So there's my little discussion on playing the right note. Now at the right time, this is something a lot of people do poorly as well. Knowing your downbeat is regularly coming, being able to subdivide, practice with a metronome, don't be early. All these things are super key. And just practicing with a regular rhythm is so underrated. When it comes to subdivisions of the notes, dots and cuts, it's really important to make sure that you don't start rounding those out, that you express those fully. And it's really important in Scottish music, which I touch on a little bit more with the musical expression part of this series. So that's key. Practicing with a metronome, there's a video I will probably link that talks about, and it's actually a guitar video, but it's really applicable, I think, to bagpipes, practicing control against the metronome. Practice playing just a scale or something, or Gracenotes on the beat, and then ahead of the beat, and then behind the beat, and then on the beat. And being able to force yourself to catch up, slow down, whatever needs to be done, so that you're back in sync with whoever you're playing with, your external, your drummer, your metronome. Really key. And then the last thing is clean transitions. So no crossing noises, no crossing noises, no crossing noises, no crossing noises. The biggest crossing noise, and some people will say this is the only crossing noise, but I would disagree, is hand-to-hand crossings where you drop before you lift. Right? And you get that big fat low G or low A sound. That is the most problematic crossing noise for sure, but it's not the only one. The way you avoid that is always lift before you drop, and always lift the highest fingers that are going to lift. So right? Always lift before you drop, so you avoid that. The next one would be the rolling or intermediate crossing noises, super common from like low G to B. Always lift the highest finger first. Right, you avoid that way. And then the last one is false fingering. So that is when I am overcompensating for my lift, drop, and false fingering. Can't really hear it on a practice chanter, but we all know that E with a bottom hand up sounds terrible on the Highland pipes. Hopefully you know that. If you don't know that, trust me, it sounds terrible. It's out of tune, and especially with the major fifth against your drums, it's going to be really noticeable. Even to non-musical people, they're just going to think, I don't really like how bagpipes sound. And that's your fault for not playing accurately and well. So, clean playing. Play the big notes right. Play the right note at the right time with clean transitions.
Part 2 of step 1, have good finger work, is have good embellishments. So here we're talking about playing the grace notes, the steps of your embellishments, and how they rhythmically accentuate the tune. There's some tips we'll go over to make your embellishments better.
All right, we're talking about embellishments now. So embellishments, we are discussing first the grace notes, Second, the steps, and third, the rhythmic placement of the embellishment. So the grace notes, they might occur between two different notes, they might occur between the same note. In both cases, they should be crisp. You should focus on the pattern that the grace notes occur. So think, for instance, the G to E grace note pattern. We know that's a thing. You were probably told to practice, and you never really knew why, because you don't see that exact thing in very many tunes except the occasional jig. But think about a torlua. Torluas are almost always preceded by a G grace note. Dum, hum, hum, hum. There's that G to E grace note pattern. Think about all the times that you see a B or C doubling followed by an E grace note. Right, and High Road to Gerlach. G, D, E grace note pattern happens everywhere. Drilling that, being good at it, and being able to make it so that each of the three grace notes is the same crispness and has a similar articulative emphasis to the note that precedes. Absolutely key in making your music sound musical. If you find that, say, your D grace notes are sluggish, and that kind of thing is happening, sit there and practice playing those fast and quickly as you can, so you strengthen that finger. And not only just fast, but also try doing control. Think something you can, a rhythmic pattern that you're familiar with, like the da, 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 da. There's that control, right? Or right? And whatever it is, pick something that you like, tap it out until that finger is able to controllably do nice crisp grace notes because you've strengthened it. Once you start applying these grace notes to embellishments, so in a torlo, we just talked about the G to E grace note pattern, but there's also the two low G grace notes. Those are what I refer to as steps of the embellishment. The low Gs are actually being sounded as real notes, separated by the G, D, and E grace notes. So the steps you want to be longer than our articulative grace notes. You want them to be still quite small in comparison to the real notes of the tune, and you want them to be equal and not used as a wind up or jumping off point. So in the case of the torlua, we don't want to go, right? That wasn't equal. We paused on one because it's easy to do just to tap back to the low G, but when I had to worry about that E grace note up to low A, people a lot of times slow down. You see that in P-Rock a lot, especially with beginning players, especially once they're starting to learn things like the Kronla. They find a spot that's comfortable, they pause there for a second, they use that to prepare themselves for the rest of the embellishment or whatever. Don't do that. Practice getting all the way through where each step is equal. And try to keep those steps equal throughout the tune. So if I'm still fairly new to torluas, playing Scott and the Brave, don't go, right? That was just jarring when I got to the doublings, and they were super, super tight and crisp. Slow your doublings down, control them, play them like the torluas. Right? Keeps it flowing smoothly throughout, keeps that symmetry, and adds to the musicality. Eventually, your torluas can be nice and crisp, and you could do, right, if you wanted to do that. I think it's probably a little overdoing it, but you do you. As long as it's equal steps, small steps, and you're not using anything to wind up. Last but not least, placement to the beat. Whether you start on the beat, finish on the beat, or straddle the beat. This is absolutely key. Some people will say you always start on the beat, always, always, always. Some people will say all your low G-centric movements end on the beat, all your doublings start on the beat. I hold the theory that the first instance of the theme note should occur on the beat. which means that D throws, in my opinion, straddle the beat. And I'll explain. With a doubling, say I'm going to go A and then C doubling. C, C, right? What I'm doing is I'm playing a C twice. If I'm playing a grip from A to C, A, but a C, the C is still occurring on the beat. All of the other accentuating stuff is occurring before the beat. In the case of a D now, right there would be my first D. Or, right? So that is where I place the beat. Whatever you do, match your pipe major, and if you're in my band, that's me, and do it consistently. Because that's really the key, is the consistency of the style, so that the music flows in a reasonable and interesting manner. So there we go. Embellishments. Playing your grace notes nice and crisp, the steps of your embellishments small and even, and placing them compared to the beat in the correct place so that the music and the rhythm is enhanced.
The last part of step 1, have good finger work, is part 3, have good musicality. So here we're talking about how you express your dots and cuts, the idea of grace note fusion, and musical phrasing. We'll discuss the details and tips to improve your musicality here.
All right, so anybody who is a student of the Piper's Dojo is probably familiar with these terms, but I am going to discuss the dots and cuts, the grace note fusion, and the phrasing as I understand it. So for dots and cuts, within Scottish music, we tend to, because it's a folk idiom, we tend to overexpress the mathematical and classical definition. So a dot, as we all know, means add half the note's value. If I've got a half note and it's dotted, it goes from 2 beats of common time to 3 beats of common time. When I'm subdividing within a beat, however, rather than going from 50% of a beat to 75% of a beat, typically what we're going to do is lean into that dot a little more, maybe 80%, maybe 85, 89, 92%, whatever. It doesn't exactly matter how much percent. It matters that it's more than 75. And actually, and then of course the corollary to that is your short notes have to take up less time before you get to the end of the beat, and you need to be accurate to the next downbeat. So within the idiom, I think it's important to express fairly consistently, but between idioms you can move it around a little bit. So if I'm playing High Road to Gerlach, that was probably, I would guess, 80 to 85% of the beat. Da-be-da-dum. Nice and crisp, nice, good Scottish style. If I was going to play a strathspey, that had the exact same beginning. Right? That's probably more like 90 to 95% of the beat. And that's the key right there, is understanding the expression that you're going for and adding that extra dot and extra cut appropriately for the idiom. When it comes to grace note fusion, so this is an idea where embellishments become part of the expression. In High Road to Gerlach, again, there's a great spot in the third line. Right in there. So many beginners, when I'm first teaching that, go, and they have that C, and then they play their D throw, and they're sitting on that C waiting. Okay, here, now I'm going to play a D throw. Don't wait on the C. The C is a cut note. If we're doing our dots and cuts as long as possible and as short as possible, or A-lap and ASAP, then that C should be very small. And in fact, it should be about the same length of time as the steps. Go back 6 minutes if you want to have a long discussion about steps with an embellishment. That C should be about the same length of time as the steps in the D throw. So rather than playing B, C, D throw, you're now playing B, C, D throw, right? Thinking about fusing that C into the D throw and practicing that as a chunk in and of itself. B, C, D throw. We fuse those C and the D throw together and expressing it as a single entity. So, and it works both ways. So having, for instance, a lot of strat spades, you'll have a doubling followed on a cut note followed by an E raise note. Right? Basically what you've done is you've taken that cut C or cut B and made it part of this monster embellishment that is sometimes referred to as a tarragon if you look at one of my other lessons. So there we go, fusing, making big notes part of the embellishment. And then last but not least, phrasing. Now this is really something that you can probably do without, but it's a little bit of a cherry on top of the sundae. You know, we've got our milkshake, that's the chocolate and everything is our dots and cuts. You've got our whipped cream on top, which is our fusion, and now the cherry on top is our it is the light and shade, some people call it, or pulsing, but it's knowing that a beat is more important than others, and rather than make the beat longer, just make it ruder. And by ruder, I mean, we've probably all been on an airplane where the guy in the aisle seat has his leg room and he's stretched out into the aisleway, and he's also got his elbows on both armrests, right? And the guy in the middle seat is like, you know, he doesn't get either armrest, right? Both guys get the same seat, but the guy on the aisle who's rude is just taking up a little bit more space, right? And that's what we want in a Stratospay especially, but it also applies to marches and other tunes. You want those key beats with the Stratospay is typically beat 1 to take up just a little bit more space, be a little rude to the beats around them. And so I love the tune or the Bows to Ballandalic. Right, that first high A fills as much time as I can possibly make, and so, you know, when we were just talking about how a grip would end on the beat typically, in a Stratospay, I might actually start it on the beat in the case of the or the Bows to Ballandalic, because that high A has edged that grip out just a little bit and slid it almost into beat 2, and so knowing when to do that and how to do that is our cherry on top of musical expression.
As a refresher, here's our 3 easy steps tree diagram. Today we discussed how to have good finger work by focusing on clean playing, that's your real notes, good embellishments, that's your grace notes, and musical expression, how everything works together. Take care, guys.